I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we're all joining from today. For me, that's Gadi country of the Eora Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. We acknowledge the diversity of First Nations peoples and their continued connection and custodianship of the country, waters and seas of what we now call New South Wales. And we extend those respects to our First Nations colleagues here at Create New South Wales and to all First Nations people joining us on the call today. I'm now going to hand over to Brianna to welcome everybody.
It's me. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the webinar on 2-year. Firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge that some of you are awaiting outcomes from the 4-year multi-year round. Further to the email we sent on Friday to all 4-year applicants, we are continuing to work through the process and will notify you of the outcomes in the coming days. To support applicants in this 2-year round, we'll also review the closing date to ensure everyone has at least 4 weeks to prepare their application. We want to make sure everything's equitable in that process. And I just wanted to say thank you all for your patience and understanding in this. Anna, back to you.
Thanks, Brianna. So in the first webinar on 2-year multi-year funding, which we delivered last year, we presented an overview of the program guidelines, including the purpose and aims of the 2-year program, the guidelines for eligibility, and a checklist of what you'll need to supply as part of your application. So if you haven't already watched the first webinar, we do strongly suggest that you do so. And Jane's going to post a link in the chat now. Today's webinar is also being recorded and will be made available online. The agenda today is a brief outline of the 2-year multi-year program, followed by more detailed information on addressing the assessment criteria, how the questions in the form relate to the assessment criteria, the templates provided to help you with attachments, and there will also be an opportunity for questions that may have come up for you that were not covered in the first webinar.
And sorry, Anna, can I just add, if everyone puts their questions in the chat, we'll go through that at the end.
Thanks, Brianna. Just going to hand over to Jane now.
Oh, thanks, Anna, and hi, everyone. I'm just going to give you a little brief overview, I guess, of our 2-year program. As I'm sure many of you are aware, we've done a lot of work on our ACFP reform, and this is our multi-year program, which is part of that reform. We heard loud and clear from the sector that, 1 year was not sustainable, so we've moved into a 2-year organisation funding program, which we think is really exciting. The important thing to remember, if some of you have already had project funding, this is a contribution to the organisation. It's quite different to project funding. So you'll be called upon in the application form to represent how this funding would contribute to your whole organisation. A little reminder that there are 2 categories for which you can apply, depending on whether you've previously received organisation funding from Create New South Wales. How much your organisation can apply for depends on 2 categories, as detailed in the slide. If your organisation has not previously received annual or multi-year organised funding from Create New South Wales, you can apply for between 60 to 100,000 per annum. Remember that is per year across the 2-year period. If your organisation has previously received annual or multi-year organised funding from Create in 23 financial year, 23, 24 or 25, you can apply for up to 200,000 per year. And the funding covers a period from 1st of Jan 2026 through to the 31st of December 2027. So that's the full 2-year program. The round is now open, as Brianna said, and it's open until the 19th of May at this stage with a closing date of 2 p.m. Please revisit the guidelines. I'll chat a link to that put a link to that in the chat shortly. I'll put the guideline link there. And as I've already done, there's a link to the first webinar, which gives a great background to the program as well. I'll now hand back to Anna, who's going to go through the assessment criteria and application form.
Thanks, Jane. So we'll now take a look at the assessment criteria, which will form the basis of how the Artform Board panels will assess your application. For the 2-year multi-year funding, there are 3 weighted assessment criteria, and the first is artistic and/or business innovation, and it makes up 40% of your application. This criteria is about your organization's approach to business planning and artistic or service delivery. And the slide here shows the criteria for artistic and/or business innovation and the sections of the application form that relate to those criteria. Your responses to questions 1 and 2, as well as your artistic or service plan, and if you choose to include them, samples of work, should demonstrate to assessors how your organization meets the criteria. Here are the questions in the application form that relate to that first criteria of artistic and/or business innovation. Question 1 is split into 2 parts. 1A focuses on the role that your organization plays in the New South Wales arts and culture ecology. And in answering this question, you could think about how your organization delivers programs or services for New South Wales audiences, art form, within your community or location, and the people you serve and engage with. And then in the second part, 1B, think about your organization's approach to delivering programs and services. Are there particular partnerships or services that help you to deliver your organization's objectives? And the second question is your opportunity to describe what activities your proposed program will deliver over the 2 years. And if you're planning any changes to your business as usual operations, you can include those activities. For example, you might be investing in the development of new work or programs. Are you planning any changes to the structure of your business to become more sustainable, such as refreshing your strategic plan or governance and organization structure? Business development could also include actions for improving how your business runs, like First Nations protocols, a disability action plan, refreshed workplace policies, or improvements to accessibility. And activities related to business growth could also be considered in this response, like new partnership models or marketing and audience development plans for increased sponsorship or philanthropy. The second assessment criteria is diversity and participation, which makes up 30% of your application. On the slide here, you can see that questions 3 and 4, as well as your artistic or service plan and work samples, if you choose to include them, will demonstrate to the Artform Board assessment panel how your organization responds to these criteria. And question 3, for diversity and participation, is an opportunity to explain how your organization supports participation by diverse communities and audiences. For example, your organization may provide self-determined opportunities for First Nations creatives and arts and cultural workers, or delivers programs or services that are inclusive and accessible, for example. And question 4 is a broader question that addresses 2 criteria: diversity and participation and organizational sustainability. For this question, explain how your organization will support sustainable career pathways for artists and/or arts and cultural workers. And you may also wish to outline how you create a safe workplace and your rationale behind your wages and fees. The third and final assessment criteria is organizational sustainability, and that's also worth 30%. Assessors here will be looking at your response to question 4, as well as your budget and also your attached documents, including your financial statement or balance sheet, your organizational chart, if this has been included, and your artistic or service plan. To address this criteria, organizations should be able to demonstrate to the Artform Board assessors your ability to meet the criteria of good governance, safe workplaces, and strong financial management. Your budget should be realistic and appropriate to deliver your proposed program of activities or services. Some things that assessors might look for are there multiple income streams and diverse sources of income? Does the organization have a track record of financial stability and sustainable business practices? Does the organization have the governance and staffing structure to deliver a successful program? And does the organization demonstrate safe workplace practices? And finally, remember that successful applicants will be expected to deliver on at least one of the 5 ACFP strategic priorities. So when thinking about your responses to the 4 questions, consider how your work or programming might address one or more of these 5 priorities. For more information on interpretation and definitions of the strategic priorities, you can take a look at the glossary, and I think Jane is going to post a link in the chat. And I'm now going to hand over to Michael Huxley.
Hi everyone, thanks Anna. I get all the fun stuff. Let's Sally in. While there's a number of documents you can attach to your application, there are only 2 that are mandatory, and they are your financial statements and the artistic or service plan. The artistic service plan should outline your activities for the period of 1 January 26 to 31 December 26. Jane, would you be able to let those people in from the lobby? Remembering that, as Jane said, that multi-year funding supports the organisation as a whole, so you should include all of the programs and projects you are planning for 2026. It's also an opportunity to talk about the activity in a strategic way. Who is it for and what are the expected social and cultural outcomes? For example, a social outcome may be stronger connections to your community, or a cultural outcome may be support for emerging artists. You can also include the key personnel who will be involved in that program. You don't need to include everyone, just the person who will be leading the program, and you can note if they're confirmed or not. They don't have to be confirmed. Obviously, the more that's confirmed, the stronger the application is. You can choose to attach a detailed budget to your application, and we've provided a template that will summarise the budget down to all the fields you need to enter into Smarty Grants. And while attaching the budget is optional, it's a great way to provide additional information about each area of your budget and your program without actually using the limited words that are available in the little box under the budget section. The financial statements are mandatory to upload, so your most recent set of audited accounts for, say, the financial year ending 31 December 2024, and you can upload that. If you're an LGA, you should upload the whole of council accounts, which will probably be for 30 June 2024, and use that information to fill in the balance sheet information required in the Smarty Grants form. And just a reminder, in the equity system section of it, some people, it's not quite clear. Restricted reserves are those reserves that have been set aside for a special purpose, such as a building fund or maybe a new work development fund. But generally, most of your equity will sit as an unrestricted reserve. If you don't have audited accounts, then you need to upload at least a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement. And these really should be at 31 December 2024. And just a reminder, a profit and loss statement shows all of your income and expenditure for the period up until 31 December for the year, and the balance sheet lists all of your assets and liabilities as at 31 December. They should be certified in some way, either by the chair of the organisation or the CEO, saying they are a true and accurate record. So if you've presented them at your last AGM or your last board meeting, committee meeting, that would be a really good start. Work samples are a way you can actually talk about your organisation and provide evidence of what you do and how you engage with your audiences or your customers. There are page limits, maximum of 10 pages, and particularly a limit on the size that you can upload. So it's only 25 megabytes. So if you're putting in lots of images, just make sure those images are compressed down. It's a way to include things to give the assessors an additional flavour about your organisation, but we'd actually also say have pity on the assessors and only upload materials that are going to support your application and demonstrate information about your company. And just a reminder, you no longer need to provide letters of support. And finally, the organisation chart, which is optional. where you can show your staff structure and the decision-making process in the organisation. You might like to outline if there's any committees or advisory committees, such as a First Nation advisory group or a disability inclusion group, that can feed into that decision-making within that structure. And if we could go to the next slide, Jan, thank you. So here's the artistic and service plan. Just make sure you download the latest version of this. There's been a couple of versions of it, and this is the latest version. You can get that from within the Smarty Grants application form or actually within the guidelines as well. This is a mandatory template, so to enable the assessors to compare apples with apples. And you use it for your artistic and service plan. And this should really also speak to the answers to question 2 as well. And here you can put in a brief description of the activity, and that could be an exhibition, a season of new work or a presentation of new work, maybe a series of workshops, or if you're doing some work on your organisation, maybe something about improving your website or building a customer relationship management system or a CRM. But the point is to give the assessors the activities that your organisation will undertake in 2026. And I think it's important to note that this level of activity should be supported by your budget, and your budget should reflect the level of activity, so that the two things actually speak to each other. In the next column, you can talk about who you've identified as the target audience for that activity, who do you expect to turn up and who do you expect to be engaged. Obviously, if you're doing work on your own company, then it's your board, your staff, internally, the company who's you're expecting to engage with that. You include what you think the cultural or social outcomes might be, and also where the activity is going to take place. If you can, the venue, the suburb, the postcode is really important for us to help understand and also advocate for where the cultural activity is happening across New South Wales. And then, as I said before, just the key personnel who are involved. You don't need to list every single staff member, just the key people there. And in that final column, if you are successful, that will be the bottom line to help you in your acquittal, to report what you have done and what hasn't happened and perhaps why it hasn't happened. So that's all from me. Back to you, Anna.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. And that is the end of the presentation. So thank you all so much for attending today. For more information, please make sure you read the guidelines carefully, and please don't leave the application to the last minute. Applications strictly close at 2 p.m. on Monday, the 19th of May, and that is 2 p.m., not 5 or midnight. Links will now be posted in the chat to all the information and resources you may need, or as we've been going along, we've posted in the chat. So please go there for more information. You can also book in a meeting with one of the team, or send us an email, and please do get in touch. And I'm now going to pass back to Brianna, who's going to have a look at the questions. Thanks, Brianna.
No worries. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, everyone. I'm just going to roll down the list in the chat, so please feel free as I'm rolling through to put any others if you want clarity on anything. Absolutely happy to address it. In terms of the first one, do we speak more broadly to our activity as an arts company, or about the activities that would be covered by this funding? This is more about you as an arts company, because this is multi-year funding. It's a whole of company approach. Create would be only contributing a partial amount. So we want to see what all that unique role that your organisation plays within the ecology. We've only been awarded a Create New South Wales grant under the Cultural Access Priority Area projects. Which level of funding within the 2-year funding model can we apply? You can apply for level 1, which is 60,000 to 100,000. To be able to apply for up to 200, you have to have had either annual or multi-year funding in the last 2 years. If we were successful for annual funding for orgs for 24-25, are you still able to apply for the 200? Yes, you are, because you were successful in the last round for annual funding. In terms of the service, the artistic plan / service plan, you're a biennial organisation. 26 is a planning year, 27 is activity year. How should you approach this critical element? Many festivals are biennial festivals or have one big output. What we would suggest is when you're doing your artistic plan that you really go, this is working towards selecting speakers for this many events, selecting venues for this type of event. So you, whilst your activity might be for 2026, you're also providing the context of how it would be presented in the 2027 activity year. Also, in answer to the questions within the form, really considering speaking to that you're a biennial festival, why this model is important, what the festival delivers and who it delivers for. Financial year is 30th of June 2024. In the application, it says the last financial report from your AGM. Is that okay? If you're doing on a financial year, then 30th of June 2024 is absolutely okay. The artistic service plan include all 2026 activities or just the activities identified to be funded by Create New South Wales. It should be all of your activities because this is about giving a whole of organisation representation. Again, this is organisational funding. It's not project funding, which is probably one of the big differences. So what the art form boards are looking at is what your whole of the organisation is going to deliver. The same with the budgets. It should be a whole of organisation budget. So your artistic plan should match your budget, which should match your answer to the questions, which should match your support material. So think about it like you're telling a story across all the different elements of the application about your organisation, what it does, why it's important and what it's delivering for New South Wales. You're a museum within a larger heritage organisation. Can you apply as a business unit or do we need to apply as a larger organisation? You can apply as a business unit. Put your budgets and your programs in for that business unit only, but again, the whole of the business unit's activities, not just the activities funded by Create New South Wales. In the compliance description, it says the funding ask should be commensurate with the level of programming. What does that mean exactly, given the reference to the ask being no more than 80% of total funding? That means if you are asking for 200,000, but you are delivering one workshop in one day that involves 5 people, the art form boards may ask, what do you need the 200,000 for? So again, it's really about telling that story on how the funding will be expended, what is the scale of your activity and organisation, and what is your positioning within New South Wales. For those that miss out on 4-year, go to 2-year. 4-year again, how will these rounds sync up? So we will always make sure that there isn't a gap in terms of funding, which has been the design of the new funding reform program. With 2-year and 3-year not syncing up, there will be similar timelines in terms of applications because applications always happen much earlier than when the end of funding does. So people will be able to align future funding with either 2-year or 3-year goals. For festivals in the activity plan, is it for a single event only or are there other steps you can include? If you are a festival, I would strongly consider including all of your steps because things like selecting your venue, selecting your presenters, selecting the work, if there's a curatorial vision to the festival, what is that curatorial vision? What is that speaking to? So really thinking about who you might be engaging, how you're engaging them and how that will lead to the presentation within that. Could I hear about multi-arts assessment, arts companies who have a range of core practices? Do we put into one board or do we have previously? In the assessment, as published in the guidelines at the moment, multi-arts is assessed by a subcommittee, but it is open to organisations that presenting organisations who have multiple art forms. So, for example, you might be an arts centre that presents theatre, dance, contemporary music, visual arts. That's the definition of multi-arts. If you're looking at new art forms or experimenting with different arts practice, then you'll be best placed to think about digital, immersive, experimental, and light art. And that's why there's been a separation of those two, so that multi-arts is very specific for presenting organisations that encompass multiple art forms as separate presentations, whereas digital, sorry, it's a long title, digital, immersive, experimental, and light art is about looking at the intersections of different art forms and how we might be presenting or experimenting with them. We invested in the creation of a custom strategic plan for the 4-year funding application. Can we use this instead of the artistic plan template? The idea of 2-year is that whilst organisations may have strategic plans, it's not mandatory because it is open to newer organisations. So please use the artistic plan template. If you wanted to, you could consider putting your strategic plan as additional material. However, to Michael's point earlier, the assessors are under no obligation to read that. It is just what is mandatory that the assessors will be focusing their energies on. How much is it about selling the strengths of the organisation's history versus the organisation's future ambition? I think the questions speak to that in terms of what is the role in the arts ecology, what you will be delivering for 2026 and 2027, which is the funding periods. So whilst you should be demonstrating that you are a sustainable organisation who is able to deliver what you're proposing, this is for funding for 26 and 27, and that's where the focus of the assessment is. Will you partially fund a request? There can be partial funding. However, we will always talk to organisations around that, and people will be able to vary any outputs based on the level of funding that they receive. Hey, Vicky. Brianna just mentioned to qualify for over 100K, you've received multi-year annual funding. Yes. If you were 2022, you were not eligible to go over the 100K. That is correct. Where do non-classical music organisations apply to, given Sound New South Wales does not have a multi-year or annual programs, and Create New South Wales now only funds classical organisations? We fund classical, ensemble, choral, opera. So there's a range of music organisations that we fund under and percussion under the classical music definition. In terms of specifically contemporary music, that absolutely sits with Sound New South Wales, and I would be suggesting having a conversation with them about what their future plans are in terms of multi-year. But we have included a broad enough definition to make sure that there are no gaps between Sound and Create New South Wales funding. If we plan to scaffold HR growth over the next 2 years and are likely to have more expenses in 27 than 2026, how do we represent this given we are only required to present a 2026 budget? Again, there's 2 ways. One would be about what are your diversity of income areas. So how might income be increasing to support the growth in 2027? The other option is looking at how you might expend the Create New South Wales money within the 2026 period to support some growth, and then where other growth opportunities happen within 2027, how that might occur. Does receiving 2-year funding restrict receiving additional Create New South Wales project funding? Yes. If you are successful in your multi-year funding application, you cannot apply for any other project funding. However, individual artists who may be looking to work with your organisation or partner with you are still eligible to apply, and you are able to provide letters of support for them. However, the funding should go to the individual artist, not to the organisation applicant. Will the 2-year funding be offered annually or every 2 years? If you're unsuccessful this year, when can you apply again? We're working through those timelines at the moment, but again, many of us come from the sector, and we're really conscious that people don't just suddenly want their 2-year funding to end, so there will be forward planning timelines. Once that's confirmed, we'll let you know. Within an LGA context, is a business unit a legally distinct part of the organisation or just a narrowing of a particular area? For example, where a council has a gallery, a theatre and a broader cultural development programs, is the business unit all of these, one of these, or up to us as the applicant? It depends on the LGA itself. So some LGAs have distinct galleries, have distinct museums, have distinct theatres, and each of them apply as separate business units. When you do apply as a business unit, though, of an LGA, please put your budget in of that business unit. Do not put the whole LGA budget, because that does not enable the assessors to see what it is. And again, if you are applying as the gallery, it is only your program for the gallery. If you are applying as the theatre, it's only your program for the theatre. So I would just make it really clear which ones that you are applying for. And you would have different heads of the organisation. So the head of the gallery is going to be different to the head of the theatre, and making sure that that business unit distinction is made clear. I understand we need to include activities for 2026 only in the application. If successful, will 2027 activities be requested by Create New South Wales at some stage, and will the second year of funding be reliant on this further information? The second year of funding won't be reliant on that further information, because you will be contracted for 2 years. However, it will be reliant on you submitting a project plan and forward plan for activities in the 2027 period. We will absolutely ask for it, and we will align that with reporting metrics and KPIs if you are successful. So, and that's usually done a year in advance. So for example, if you were successful in this funding, you've done 2026 now, we would be asking again around October and November for what your 2027 activities are. You would submit that, and then your payment would be subject to submission of that. We have some ongoing projects in various stages with outcomes planned for 2027. How do we talk about these? And also, how do we separate the organisational funds from the project funds in the budget? So as an organisation, you may have multiple projects happening, and they are part of your organisational budget. So you would be looking at going, we have 20 projects happening. The total artist fees for all those projects might be XYZ. We have 3 staff, we pay them to deliver all these different projects. That's part of your operational cost. It's not about having to do a discrete budget for this project. It's about going, this is all of my operational costs for this year, and about grouping them together. And that's where often the template that Michael spoke to can help you actually create a whole of organisation budget. Can we do year 1 as planning, i.e. an audience development and marketing project, and then year 2 as delivering programs for those identified audiences? You can, we have said you can do business development activity. Again, it's just about making the case about why that particular activity is important, what it's going to bring to both your organisation and to the New South Wales Arts Ecology. Can your programs include interstate and international artists? Yes, they can, because whilst we are New South Wales government and we fund in New South Wales, this is about how you might be a leadership organisation in promoting New South Wales activity or providing access for New South Wales audiences to international or interstate artists. Can we include a presentation of a work that has been funded by Create New South Wales previously with project development funding in 2023 and developed in 2024 as part of your artistic support material? You absolutely can include works that have been funded by Create New South Wales. Again, just making sure that it's within time frames and upload limits. And to that support material, it really is about telling the story of your organisation. So it's about going, what works can I show that really show where my organisation is and where my organisation is going. For LGAs, is the 80% ask exclusive or inclusive of total budget, noting Create New South Wales won't fund core staff. 80% should be, if it's a I'll start that again. It has to be like the business unit. So if the business unit, you would be saying the LGA is covering all the core staff, the venue costs, the marketing, the equipment, the materials, and the Create New South Wales funding is going to the programming. So artist fees, artist production costs. It's really about making that clear, because LGAs cannot apply for core operational costs. The expectation is the LGA will cover that, but we will cover those annual programming costs to make sure that New South Wales artists are supported across the state. I think that's it. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience in listening. Last question, will 2-year funding be offered again in 2026? Again, to my earlier comment, we're finalising the timelines on when that exactly will be offered. Also, as Anna said, please book in with the team if you would like to do a one-on-one session to help answer any of your questions. Make sure you read the guidelines. Forms are all up. Enjoy. It's a lot less than what it used to be. Anna, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Brianna. Thanks everyone so much for joining today, and thanks to my colleagues as well for jumping in on the slides, and for Brianna, just quick fire extraordinaire on the questions. But yes, please do get in touch anytime. We're here to help you with the application, any questions that you have. And we'll end the session now. Thanks everyone. Bye.